Hey y'all, we're gonna do this review of Love and Marriage Huntsville Season 6, Episode 16, titled Innocent Until Proven Keke. I'm gonna try and make this a quick one, but if you enjoy this review, make sure you like, share, comment, and subscribe. Now let's get into it. So they show a little mirage of clips with each of the cast asking each other if they heard what happened to Keke and how there's $1,000 reward for her. And then they show something saying that Huntsville police is looking for Keke. And then they show a clip from the Crime Stoppers and how she used her kid to help her steal some stuff and how she almost hit two cars trying to get out of there. And then we're with Tiffany and the baby, and then Melody shows up. And in her confessional, Melody says she's stopping by to see Tiffany to see how she's been after giving birth and all that. And then she's asking Tiffany how she's been, and Tiffany says that it's just a lot that's been happening. And you can just tell from the look on her face, she just wanted to get into this Keke mess. Cause what else has been happening, girl? Please. But then Melody asks like, "Oh, what now?" And for some reason, what's her name? Tiffany starts talking about what's going on with Keke, and I really thought Melody was gonna ask Tiffany like, I'm here to ask you how you been, but okay, she just let Tiffany run out the mouth. Um, but just taking any chance to throw shade, Tiffany asked Melody, what are they doing with their brands? And then Melody laughs because she knows that Tiffany's trying to be shady and funny towards Keke. But Tiffany's like, no, for real, because Melody has told her to give Keke chances, and she says that when she sees something like what she saw on TV, that means obviously she needs some kind of help. And Tiffany is just kind of laughing and gloating almost about the whole situation with Keke, and Melody is looking like, well, what's so funny? And honestly, I thought Mel would just be like, yeah, because Keke is a mess, but apparently her and Keke are really some type of friends, and she didn't really like throw her under the bus, so that was nice to see. But basically my whole thing with Mel was like, you already know how your little friend is and how she likes to laugh at other people's misery. So don't really be surprised that she's just kind of like, yeah, because Kiki's a mess and what are we doing, being associated with her in so many words. But then Tiffany just keeps saying, like as moms, what are they doing? And she's just being very judgmental, in my opinion. But then Melody says, well, you can't believe everything that comes across the TV screen. And Tiffany's like, yeah, but it was on the news and the police are involved. And I'm just like, girl, you're so gullible. But then in her confessional, Tiffany says that she believes this is the first time she's ever known anyone on Crime Stoppers. It says that you can't be new, I guess, with whatever Kiki's trying to get into in her industry or whatever. She says you can't be new and doing stupid stuff like that around town, and that she's gonna ruin everybody's brand because of their association with each other. And my whole thing is I'm sure other castmates feel the same way about Keke, in the brand thing, I guess, in so many words. But Keke don't give a fuck about y'all brand, especially you, Tiffany. So I really think you should stop. And they've been doing this long enough, and Kiki's been doing this long enough with all her messiness that like Tisha and them, they know how to handle Keke and know how to move with her. So girl, don't be worried about your brand too fucking much. But then Tiffany says, how does it get all the way on TV saying, that they need to call the police and why wouldn't the store just handle it? And Melody's like, she doesn't know. But Keke hasn't been arrested and that she's innocent until proven guilty. And Tiffany's like, okay, Melody, whatever you say in so many words. But she can just tell that Mel's just not trying to indulge in that BS because she's there to talk about that baby. And Tiffany just only cares about her brand, and she's trying to make it clear to Melody and to the rest of us that basically she feels like Keke is an embarrassment and that she's just trying to control the kind of people that she's around, and that people will question Keke, um like if what they saw on TV really happened, and that they saw her car trying to, almost hit people trying to get out of the parking lot or whatever. And it's like, Tiffany, we know Keke is a hot ass mess, but it is what it is. And you think Mel really cares about her brand? Like that's not really much of an excuse in my opinion. But then Melody tells Tiffany that she's just going to be checking on Keke just to shut Tiffany up, in my opinion. But then in her confessional, Melody says that everybody has a right to protect their brands, and if for any reason Tiffany feels being around Keke would affect her brand in any way, then the simple answer is to just not be around her if she feels like that. But then Tiffany's like, oh, she wants to do a little baby reveal video, and it was kind of cheesy, but it was kind of cute. And I'm sorry if you watch this and you just be like, damn, she don't ever give Tiffany no break. And I don't like her. Everything she does irk me. And if you don't like that, I'm sorry, but I'm very biased when it comes to her. I do not like that lady. But moving on. So we're with Courtney, and he shows up to Black, and then they show a clip of Stormy getting real ratchet with Marsau and Tisha about $100. And in his confessional, Marsau says that he wasn't expecting to see Courtney, but he can only imagine that Stormy's attacks on him have been misinterpreted into him somehow trying to check her. And then Courtney asked Marsau, how the expo went. Marsau says that it was nice and they got good feedback and it was a nice turnout and all that. And Courtney says, but a lot of people didn't pay $100, did they? And then Marsau says, well, one person didn't pay. And Courtney's like, well, my wife, right? And Marsau puts his drink down, like, all right, he want to do this right now? Let's do it then. And then Courtney says that he's just trying to get right into it, basically, and about Marsau checking his wife. And Marsau's like, that's what you heard? And Courtney was like, that's what he knows. And Marsau's like, oh, that sounds good. And then Courtney begins to explain how Marsau confronted his wife about the money, but nobody said anything about paying any money. And then Marsau says that they expected the vendors to pay for the booth and for the people who were speaking to donate that. And Courtney was like, well, did y'all write that shit down? Did y'all say it? Like, was this a verbal contract? Like, what's going on? And I understand that because some people like to see certain stuff on a fine line, and you can't just be expecting people to do stuff unless you make it 100% crystal clear. And from the clips that they've shown us, literally they brought in Courtney and Stormy at the very last minute. So even if they made that clear to everybody else that they was having the meetings with, y'all probably didn't make it as clear to Courtney and Stormy. So for Marsau to be like, well, we were expecting, that's not really good enough, especially not with business. But I still kind of feel like Stormy doesn't know how to communicate. Like, she just gets real patronizing. But anyways, let's continue. Marsau says that they have put out all the information on the internet about, the payment and stuff. And Courtney laughs and says that, Marsau can blame it on that if he wants to. But Courtney says his whole thing is, he asked Marsau, why is he always coming from women? And Marsau kind of seemed a little speechless for a second. And then Courtney also says to Marsau that he's always talking about women, and what Marsau should do is worry about his business instead of women's business. And then Marsau tells Courtney that he is aware that Black Expo was his business and collecting from the vendors was a part of that, and that it's not a free for all for multimillionaires to take up eight sections to sell their product. And he says apparently asking for payments is a trigger word for Stormy. And then Courtney tells Marsau that whatever he said to Stormy pissed her off, and it did. And I get Courtney's just there, like, stop talking to my wife. I'm talking to my wife like that. I get it, but your wife was kind of talking a little crazy as well. But then Marsau says that maybe it was just a simple overlook of like, oh, they forgot to pay this bill. And Courtney says, no, he should have got Tisha to go talk to Stormy, like so the wives could talk to each other about the whole situation. And then Marsau's like, well, you can't be that much of a protector. Like, boy, what? Because what do you mean? I honestly would rather he come and be like, look, don't talk to my wife. It don't matter if she was right or wrong. Don't say nothing to her. Because Marsau, you let somebody talk to Tisha crazy and you tell her that she's wrong. So he can't really say too much because he don't know how to defend his wife, point blank, period. But then Courtney tells him that if he lets any man talk to his woman like that, he's a fool. And then Marceau says that Tisha is very good at handling herself. And Courtney's like, well, my wife is too. And Marceau says, well, not with men. And then Courtney tells Marceau it's how he did everything, and he knows how he did it was wrong. And I agree because he should have made it clear from the jump what he expected about the money thing. But I also feel like if he was so pressed about that $100, he could have waited until after the event to say something, not before, because it set the whole energy off. It just set the whole thing off. And then Marceau says that what's interesting to him is that a guy who is saying to him to stay out of women's business, he's literally selling hair care products for women for a living. And then Courtney kind of swiftly sits up out of his seat and points at Marceau and tells him that he knows exactly what he means about the staying out of women's business. And yeah, Marceau took a little dig, but he be funny. I'm sorry. Like, it's messed up, but he be funny. But then Marceau says that he thinks that they're blowing that whole situation a little out of proportion. And then Courtney tells Marceau that he should have just apologized then and there. And Marceau says that there is an apology coming, and one day he will be ready to receive it, and he'll accept it with open arms, and he'll forgive. And then Courtney laughs and tells Marceau he crazy. And then Marceau keeps trying to say that, it's the dude who sells hair care products for me, basically trying to clown him. But nigga, he making money. He making bank off that hair care product. So I don't, don't knock it till you try it. But then Courtney says, well, here's a tip for the $100 for some water. And then Marceau just keeps saying, oh, it's the hair care products for me in so many words. And then Courtney was like, he got too many millions of dollars to be worried about 100. And then in his confessional, Courtney says that with he and Marceau can't battle with him because he says he can drop stacks after stacks. And that he says that it's crazy that Marceau wants to be in a pissing contest with him about $100 because he could have gotten that way before the event if he would have just said something about it sooner. And again, I agree. It could have been a miscommunication, but I really, really doubt that. But then Courtney says that he thinks Marceau just wants to be an asshole to women, and I guess if that's what y'all got from it, I guess. But now we're with Kimmy, and she just arrived at Tisha's house. And her confessional, Kimmy says that the last time they were all together was at the lunch with Tiffany and Stormy, and all that horrible energy. So she's just checking in on Tisha to make sure she's good and that they've already bounced back from that whole thing, and that it's her first time seeing the new temporary place that they're at. And then Kimmy asks Tisha how they've been adapting to the new space, and Tisha says that it's been okay. It's just not a lot of space, but what she's really got on her mind is that new house being built. And Kimmy asks like if she's got any timeline or anything, and Tisha says no. But then Tisha asks Kimmy how she's been, and Kimmy says she's been good. And in her confessional, she says she's officially done with her treatments and that that's behind her and that she's ready to move on, and she couldn't be any happier. And then Kimmy tells Tisha um, that they've been having a lot going on these past few weeks, and mentioned the lunch with Tiffany and Stormy. And I think Tisha said that she can't stand those girls. And in her confessional, Tisha says that she's happy that this is just a meetup between she and Kimmy because that Tiffany and Stormy thing was awful. And then Tisha says, first of all, uh, Stormy and Tiffany aren't a part of the comeback group, and they haven't done anything, and they're just sitting there criticizing everything. Like, who did they think they are? And Kimmy says that she's surprised Tiffany felt away because they called her when they did the walkthrough about if she wanted to be a part of the thing. And it's Tisha says that Tiffany says that she can speak or whatever and all of that, but she still doesn't even know what Tiffany does for real. And, I'm not gonna lie, I laughed because neither do I. And Tisha not afraid to say it, which is funny. But she was dead ass. That's the part that's making me laugh. But then Kimmy says that if somebody paid her $1,000, she wouldn't be able to tell them what Tiffany does. for a living. And Tisha says, and that's why she wasn't one of the speakers. The shade, child. But then Kimmy tells Tisha that she thought she and Stormy were in a different place, and that when they left, she was stunned at the whole situation. And Tisha says that she was surprised too. And Kimmy says that she's not sure where Stormy's energy is coming from. But then she asks Tisha, how's Keke doing? And Tisha says, oh, so you saw it. And Kimmy says, absolutely. And Tisha says, yeah, somebody sent her a whole bunch of stuff last night. And Kimmy says that she was watching it on TV live. And Tisha says, oh, she was asleep, but she woke up to like a whole bunch of people asking her what's going on with her cousin. And then Tisha says that she just hopes that Keke isn't back on the pills. And Kimmy says, well, she hopes that's not true. And Tisha says that it's embarrassing, and that they have a whole reward out for her over, Crime Stoppers, and that they just think they might have a case. And then Kimmy says that she doesn't even know how she can help Keke. And in her confessional, Tisha says that Keke really needs to get her energy towards getting herself together, and that that's not her job anymore to help Keke get herself together, and that she just needs to take ownership of her life. And Tisha tells Kimmy that she thinks she's done reaching out to all of those girls, and that she's just completely done. And Kimmy's like, oh, so you're not going to Tiffany's little baby thing? And Tisha's like, oh, she'll pray about it. Girl, if I were you, I would not go. I don't care how much money they pay you, because Tiffany is bad energy, period. Look at what happened at her baby shower. She passing the fuck out and shit. Like, no. Because that energy is not good. But then Kimmy makes a face and tells Tisha that she has to try and get things back on track. Why? To be gaslit? Girl, fuck out of here. But now we move on to Martell. And Chris Fletcher comes over to the house, and he kind of gives Chris a hard time about taking off his shoes and shit when coming to the house. And Chris is like, man, get out of here with that. And in his confessional, Martell says that he feels like if you're a realtor or a broker or showing somebody a house, or you're visiting somebody's house or anything like that, you should be removing your shoes or something. You're just trying to give this man a hard time about him telling you need to get the fuck about this house. But then they do a little small talk about how Martell is building a house near a daycare Chris and them have. And Chris is like, I'm not really here to talk about none of that. He says, like the last time, he saw them and they talked, Martell subpoenaed him and his wife to court. And Martell was sitting here like he didn't know what he was talking about. But then he was like, oh yeah. And then Chris says that, it was kind of fucked up for him to do that. Martell was like, why though? And Chris says, because it looks like that they were on one side. And the whole time that him and his wife, they're friends with both Melody and Martell, and they aren't taking any sides. And then Martell says, he told everybody that got subpoenaed to just let the truth be heard no matter what. And, whether whatever they say hurts him or not, he just wants the truth to be heard, and that nobody's taking sides. And then they put Chris in a fucking confessional seat. I was like, oh, y'all trying to get this show popping. I'm glad that they keep adding on new couples. Y'all can get rid of Tiffany and Bing Lou though, and y'all can replace them with Nail and Chris. That's completely fine with me. Carlos, if you're hearing. But when I saw they put him in a confessional seat, I was like, oh, okay. They making money, nah. But then in his confessional, Chris says that Martell subpoenaing him and his wife really pissed him off, because he stated to Martell before that they aren't picking any sides. And then Martell is trying to move on to a different conversation, saying, so like what else is going on? And Chris is like, well, this house is due to be sold. And Martell's like, yeah, as soon as he moves out. And Chris is like, no, not as soon as you move out. And Martell's fumbling over his words, basically saying that he's trying to speed up the process to get out of there, to get out of that house, because Chris gave him 30 days. And Chris was like, well, how long has it been since you've been in here, nigga? And Martell's like, 40 something, I think. And Chris is like, exactly, more than 30, nigga. Do you know how to count? But also says that the house has been on the market for 8 months. And Martell is like, okay, so what does that mean? And Chris was like, well, that's exactly how long you've been squatting here, nigga. And then in his confessional, Chris says that Martell is taking advantage of the friendship by continuing to stay in the house, and he thinks that Martell is looking for him to give him some special treatment because of who he is. And then Martell tells Chris that as a friend, he thought that he let him know when someone was seriously interested in the house and that he could possibly give him 9 more days. And Chris is like, nigga, you're not getting 90 more days. And don't you think that he already tried to, work something out for him? And then Martell says that, well, they're not going to come kick him out. And Chris was like, yes, they will, because they can. And Martell was like, they can't do that. And Chris was like, yes, they can. But then Martell says, who is the priority? And, how come as a friend he didn't be like, hey, Martell, you need help looking for a property? And Chris is like, nigga, you out of your bald head ass mind. Like, what do you mean? And then Martell, trying to justify it, says that he just asked Chris a week ago if he had any properties, and Chris says he had none. And then Martell is like, so what makes you think if you can't go out here and help him find something for him and his kids in 30 days, what makes him think that he can, you know? And then Martell keeps eating Chris up, saying, so as a friend, you want me to just pack up with my kids and go to a hotel and you just don't care? It's just about the money for you? Trying to guilt trip Chris. And Chris is like, no, it's not about the money. He just has a duty to the seller. And, he just saying it's about business right now. And I can't be mad at him for that. But then Martell is asking Chris, like, why is he harassing him about this? And Chris is saying that, that's a problem of the owner of the property. And he tells, Martell is like, okay, well, he found something, I guess, just to see what Chris is going to say. And Chris is like, well, when you leave it, nigga. And then Martell says, well, as a friend, he would expect at least 90 more days. But then Chris says, you got 2 weeks. And they just leave it at that. But now we're with cringy ass Kimmy and Maurice. I really like Kimmy in the scenes when it's just her and other people, because when she's with Maurice, he makes her look like so bad. But they're riding bikes and it's kind of cute. And in her confessional, Kimmy says that she likes being outside and she's glad they found these bikes and that the doctor told her that exercising helps a lot with trying to push the tiredness back from the treatments. And then Kimmy tells Maurice that getting out and riding bikes was nice and it reminds her of a kid and when she used to ride dirt bikes. And he's like, you did? And I'm just like, nigga, you don't know nothing about her. But then Kimmy suggests that they bring Tisha Marsau out bike riding and mentions how she saw Tisha recently and they were catching up about what happened with Tiffany and Stormy about the expo and that they had a lunch and all of that. And Maurice says that Tisha actually does do something for the community and that there's uproar about it when anybody can do something. And Kimmy says that Tisha and Marsau have been pretty coy about the money and says and mentions how Marsau asked Stormy for the $100 at the event. And then Maurice says that they paid, and Kimmy is looking like, huh? And then she asks, why would they pay? And Maurice says, well, because it's an event. And then Kimmy explains that half the vendors got in for free. And Maurice looks pissed and says, what? And he charged us too. His little fake outrage. Like, boy, get out of here. But then Kimmy tells Maurice that, the first few people that came, they didn't charge. But when the event got so large, they had to start charging people because the cost went up. And Kimmy is like, well, what cost? Because they didn't have any food and they didn't change the building. So what was really coming out of Tisha and Marsau's pocket that they had to start charging people $100? And Maurice says he feels a way about their spot being so small, and that if he paid the same amount as Stormy, he should have had the same amount of space, in so many words. And then he tells Kimmy that until she said that, he really didn't feel a way about the $100 because he feels like, in so many words, he gave more than that. But then Kimmy says that she would have to she disagreed with what Tiffany and Stormy said, but when it came to that particular part about the money, she agreed. And then she mentions the invitations that Tiffany sent out for everybody to meet the baby, and she says that she sent one to Tisha, so hopefully that means she's in a better space. And then Kimmy says that she'll call Tisha later to see if she's going, but she's going to stop at the Yoni store to get a new egg. And Maurice is looking a little confused, and Kimmy tries to explain to him that because of the treatment, she wasn't using her egg like that, so she's trying to get back to it. And Maurice is starting to catch on to what she's saying. And I'm just going to explain this right here, right now. Whenever it comes to Maurice and Kimmy talking about sex on this show, it is so cringy because you can just tell that he basically be kind of forcing her to give up some to him because he been missing out or he's stressed, and not saying it in like a assault type of manner, but he be trying to guilt trip her into giving up some when she just don't be feeling like it. Like, sir, her whole life was at risk, and you talking about some it's killing you. That's the most self-centered shit I've ever heard in my life. So I'm gonna try and get to this real quick because there's so many words. She's trying to explain to him like it's a physical thing. He's like, "Oh no, Kimmy, it's a mental thing, you know, because if you saying that you can fake it or whatever, that means that there's really nothing wrong physically. You just you just faking it. You just don't want to do it." And she's like, "You cannot say that to me, and you're making it worse with his little snarky comments." Because he's like, "Well, did the doctor ever tell you how long it was going to take for you to get back to normal?" Because in so many words, when you go to the doctors for an ailment, you usually ask questions about how long it's going to take you to get back, you know, to jump back to the shit. Nigga, when you find out you have cancer, do you really honestly think that you're thinking about when you can get back on that shit? Do you honestly think that? Now for men, I guess because the way y'all minds think, y'all just always be ready to, you know, get your shit hopped on. But not for Kimmy. This was not about that for her. She's trying to get her life back in order. She thought she was gonna die, nigga. You worried about getting your shit wet. Like, that's just so it's just so fucked up because it makes you just feel like, well, do you even care about her life or you just want to use her good puss? Like I don't it's very cringy. It's very cringy to see Maurice act like that to her about this whole situation because you wanted this woman and you supposed to be there to still take care of her regardless in sickness and in health. Isn't that what y'all said? Y'all put y'all wedding on TV. Isn't that what you said, Maurice? But now you trying to give her a hard time. She trying to go out here and get yoni eggs and shit for you, not for her. Because she know that y'all niggas got wandering eyes and she trying to keep your ass in the house because you Scotsmen are actually ridiculous. And these allegations about the parties and shit y'all be doing are actually probably true, allegedly. Because of the way you be acting like you just so agitated when you don't get none. That's why she's trying to scramble to figure out what she can do to shut your ass up. Like, damn, Maurice. And she just keep telling him like these little snarky comments is not helping. And he's like, yeah, well, whatever. Like, Kimmy, I don't know how you deal with that nigga. I don't know who worse, Marsau or Maurice sometimes. Because honestly, Maurice was cool in the first few seasons, but then he just started showing his ass. So, child, that's it with their scene. So we're with Stormy and Courtney, and they're at their little warehouse. And he mentions how he met up with Marcel, and she's like, "Well, how'd y'all even meet up?" And he's like, I just pulled up on him or whatever." And she's like, "Well, you didn't seem mad or nothing." And he was like, "Well, yeah, he was mad, but at the same time, he wanted to make it clear that Marcel isn't going to say just anything to his wife." And Courtney says that Marcel said that the expo was his business, so it didn't matter if it was a woman or a man he was confronting about that money. And Stormy says, "Well, if that was the case, why, as he as a man, is coming up to her saying that she looked different?" And Courtney kind of stops for a second and says, "Oh yeah, he definitely shouldn't have said that shit." And maybe that's what set her off. He's like, "Oh, Stormy, I didn't recognize you, because niggas can be shady as well." But he just started the energy all wrong. But I also feel like how she responded, like, "Oh, y'all want me to get Courtney?" I feel like everything else she said was fine. But when she mentioned that Courtney shit, basically threatening, like, "Oh, my husband gonna beat you up." Like, girl, ain't nobody scared of that nigga. Um, but then what he says, yeah, but then Stormy's like, yeah, he definitely shouldn't have said that. And then in his confessional, Courtney says, in his opinion, he feels like Marsau thinking that he can talk to women however he wants is just typical Marsau behavior, and that is something that lame people do. And then Stormy begins to explain to Courtney that when she met up with Tisha, she and Tisha had a moment, and says that Tisha explained how they had to start charging people at the event because it cost them $10,000, and that if people were going to be making money from the event, why not charge them? And then she says that Kimmy says that she personally didn't like. Oh wait, no. Stormy says that she personally didn't like what Tisha said about the money because she thought that this was for the community, and that when you're doing stuff for charity, you cover all the costs, and says that, how are they charging people that they're supposed to be helping? And then Courtney jokes and says that it sounds like that this needs to be their last expo. And Stormy agrees and says that, well, while she was out at that lunch or whatever, she and Tisha had a moment, and she says that Tisha got mad. And I'm like, no, girl, you had to explain how you gaslit and you patronized that lady. And Stormy already know how your ass is. So you have to explain how you was just like, oh, you mad? Okay, like you real like, ugh, I don't like that. You get that shit from your mom, bro. But then Courtney says, "Well, what the fuck kind of moment y'all had?" He like, cause it's like I gotta keep putting out all these fires. The same way Big Lou told Tiffany to sit her ass down and shut the fuck up and stop offering information that nobody asked for. Same way I feel like Courtney gonna have to sit Stormy down and be like, "Look, hun, you gonna have to stop, causing all these issues around here. It's only so much these big niggas can do." But then Stormy says that Tisha said that she didn't like how she came at her husband, but she said, however, and Stormy's like, well, Tisha was like, she didn't like how Stormy spoke to her husband. And Stormy is like, well, she knows that whenever she hears, however, or I just want to let you know, she just be like, well, bitch, you don't want to let me know nothing. And Courtney's just looking at her like, okay, and what else? Like, you got mad over that. And then Stormy says that she and Tisha went back and forth. Um, but the point she was trying to make was that Tisha wasn't over there when Marsau approached her from the beginning to end about what happened with that money in his entirety. But even when she was there, she was agreeing with Stormy. And Courtney was like, "Oh, so Marsau probably just didn't like how Tisha was agreeing with Stormy." And she's probably like, "Yeah." And in her confessional, Stormy says that she definitely thinks that Marsau and his antics are rolling over to Tisha because, as the woman, she might be feeling a lot of the backlash from the shit that her husband starts. And then Stormy explains to Courtney that Tiffany asked her to help plan her little baby reveal thing. And Courtney was like, "Oh, that should be cool." And Stormy asked if he thinks all the women will come. And Courtney says he doesn't see why they wouldn't. And Stormy's like, well, he doesn't know, she doesn't know about Keke being invited. And then Stormy shows Courtney a post about Keke being wanted in Huntsville by the police. And Courtney was like, "Is this for real?" And she's like, "Yeah, they saying Keke stole and she drove off hitting cars and shit." Y'all just want to talk about this. Like, y'all just love talking about Keke. And then in her confessional, Stormy says that the Crime Stopper situation with Keke makes her have more compassion for her, because you just never know what people are going through. And I can commend her for that part. But let's see how she gonna feel about her bestie Tiffany and what she had to say about Keke, because she definitely don't feel the same way. She feel like Keke is just a hot mess and they just don't need to be associated with her. But now we're with Melody, and in her confessional, she's like, she stopping by to go check on Keke, and she's like, "What you been up to?" And Keke says that she just got out the hospital and that this was her second time being there in a week, and saying that she was just having intense back pains. And Mel didn't really seem to believe that. And then they talk about the shirt Melody brought her to encourage her, and Keke says that things that she's been wanting have been coming to fruition, like people want to sponsor her and work for her, and how she wants to publish a children's book. And then the way the producers edit this part of the episode, they just keep showing clips as if Keke was just going on and on and on, ranting about just nothing. And then Melody is kind of just looking like, "Girl, like what the fuck did you talk about?" In her confessional, Melody says, um, Kiki's shirt says "hot mess, doing my best," the shirt that she had on when she walked in. And she says that that's the world that Keke is living in right now, but it's commendable that she's being positive considering what social media is saying right now. And then Melody tells Keke that she's glad that she is good and she's feeling better and that she's continuing to get back on the right track, and says that a lot of people have been talking and that she's seeing her videos about the Crime Stoppers, and that Tiffany brought it up. All the while Keke is just shaking her head like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. And then Melody says that Tiffany says that she knows how she is with certain people being around her because of her brain and all of that, and asks Keke if being accused of theft will be good for their brands. And Keke was like, accused or convicted? And Melody says accused, and then it says to be continued. And then they says, as of the airing of that episode, Keke hadn't been charged with any crimes in regards to that Crime Stoppers segment. And then that's basically just the end of that episode. Y'all, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to tell y'all, but Huntsville seems to be in a frenzy about this Keke thing. I feel like Martell needs to get up off his ass and go figure out something for him and his kids, because you cannot be waiting on your friends to be helping you. Like, sometimes it's really just about business and you can't be mad about that. Marsau should have definitely mentioned something about that $100, like sooner or after or something, not before, because like before the actual event of that day, because it caused a whole bunch of bullshit. And Tiffany needs to stop being judgmental, point blank, period. Like, I'm tired of this lady acting like she don't do nothing wrong. And then you see in clips, like for previews that are later on episodes of this season, she basically begging Big Lou to be in the house because, she got this baby and she by herself. You wanted him. And he was telling you, this baby gonna be a lot of work, Tiffany. This baby gonna be a lot of work. I just can't wait to see how she's gonna handle all this, because she's so judgmental when it comes to everybody else's shit. But when it comes to hers, her shit just don't stink. But whatever, y'all. If y'all enjoyed this live, make sure you like, share, comment, and subscribe. And I'm gonna see y'all on the next one.